I'm Jean. It was a Thursday night in April, and I'll never forget the pounding on my door. My parents, whom I hadn't seen in 12 years, were standing there, demanding that I come home and do my duty. They said my brother, Ethan, needed my bone marrow, my house, and my money. It was as if the past 12 years of myself made life meant nothing to them. But then, the door opened, and an elderly woman, Mrs. Thompson, whom they hadn't seen in 30 years, stood there. She looked my mother, Mrs. Miller, straight in the face and spoke a name that had been buried for decades, Amanda. In the next 60 seconds, everything they thought they could take from me crumbled. Let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up in a small town. My parents, Mr. Miller and Mrs. Miller, always favored my brother Ethan. He was the star athlete, the golden child. I was just an afterthought, a child they had to feed but never really wanted. My birthdays were always a letdown. When I turned 6, my mother forgot. I came home from school to an empty kitchen, and the calendar showed it was just an ordinary day. A kind neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, brought me a small grocery store cake. Meanwhile, my parents were at Ethan's soccer banquet. When they got home, my mother just asked if the day was important, as if she had no idea it was my birthday. After that, I learned not to expect anything from them. When I was 9, I had a piano recital at school. I was the only one in my class to get the solo piece right, and my music teacher highlighted my name in yellow on the program. But my parents didn't show up. Ethan had a regional tournament that day, and when I called to ask if they'd seen the program, my mother just said, "Ethan won, honey." At 14, Ethan broke my wrist. We were in the basement, and he was roughhousing with me. I asked him to stop, but he didn't. When I pulled away, I heard a sickening crack in my arm. My father just said, "Boys play rough, you'll be fine," and my mother told me not to make a big deal out of it. I had to take the bus to the emergency room alone and sign my own name on the cast. 3 years later, a bill for $1,500 showed up in my college mailbox. My parents had used my social security number to bill me for that night. I paid it off in installments, but I never called them about it. That was when I started saving, not knowing what for, but knowing I needed to be prepared for whatever life threw at me. On my 18th birthday, I came home from high school to find my 2 suitcases packed. My mother had folded my shirts in her familiar way. My father walked up to me, his voice flat and emotionless. He said, "You're 18 now. We're done. You were never wanted. Don't ever come back." Then he opened the door, and I walked out into the world on my own. I slept in my old car in the Walmart parking lot for 11 nights. I worked 2 jobs, bagging groceries in the morning and waitressing at a diner in the evening. I bathed in the sink of the public library's women's restroom. It was tough, but I didn't ask for help. I didn't know how. Then, a friend's mother, Mrs. Harris, saw me in the parking lot and just said, "Get in." She let me stay in her spare room for the summer. With the help of financial aid, I started community college. 2 years later, I transferred and got my bachelor's in finance. By 2020, I passed the financial analyst exam and landed a job at a local bank in the city. In 2022, I bought a small house on my own. It was a 3-bedroom Craftsman with a porch swing, and it was the first place I could truly call my own. For 12 years, my parents never called me. No birthday cards, no Christmas greetings. I told myself it was a blessing. I had built a new life, and I was happy. My closest friend, Lily, was the only one who noticed there was something missing in my life but never pushed me to talk about it. Then, in January 2026, I got a text from Ethan after 12 years. It said, "We need to talk. It's important. Call me." I ignored it. More texts came, and then my mother left a voicemail. She said Ethan was sick, stage 3, and I needed to call my father back. I saved the voicemail in a folder on my laptop labeled Evidence. In March, a formal letter arrived on my father's construction company letterhead. He used legal-sounding language, threatening me with legal consequences if I didn't cooperate. I knew they were up to something. By April, I was on edge. I knew they'd come on a Thursday because my father always ran his life according to a Thursday schedule. And sure enough, on that fateful Thursday night, they showed up at my door. As they were pounding on the door, Mrs. Thompson, who had flown in from out of town 3 days ago, was in the kitchen with me. She had a calmness about her, and I knew she was ready for whatever was about to happen. When she opened the door, my father was initially confused. He was expecting me, not this elderly woman. Mrs. Thompson, with a steady voice, said, "Your daughter is in her home. May I ask who you are?" My mother, who had been clutching my father's coat sleeve, flinched as the wind blew a spray of rain onto the welcome mat. 40 seconds into this encounter, Mrs. Thompson said, "Amanda." My father was shocked and demanded to know what she meant. My mother took a step back, her face pale. She mumbled, "No, no, no." It turned out that Mrs. Thompson was my grandmother. My mother, Amanda, had run away from home when she was 19. She had stolen $200,000 from a family trust set up by my grandfather, Mr. Thompson. She used the money to create a new identity, Mrs. Miller, and start a new life with my father. Mrs. Thompson opened a manila folder and laid out the evidence on the coffee table. There was a photocopy of a suicide note she had faked, a wire transfer authorization with a forged signature, a marriage license, and the cover sheet for the Thompson Family Trust, which was now worth $5 million. My father was in disbelief. He tried to get my mother to deny it, but she finally admitted, "It's true. I was 19. I wanted out. I stood up and said, on my 18th birthday, you told me I was never wanted. Tonight, you tell me I'm good for bone marrow, my house, and my money. I owe you nothing. You never raised me. I raised myself. You can go home." There was also evidence of Ethan's misdeeds. I showed them the credit card statements he had forged in my name, totaling $45,000 in fraudulent debt. And a denied home equity loan application he had submitted, which would have put a $650,000 lien on my house if I hadn't placed a credit freeze. At 9:50 p.m. Mrs. Thompson made a phone call. She didn't tell my parents what she had done, but I knew it was important. At 11:38 p.m. A car pulled into my driveway. It was my lawyer, Mr. Davis. He presented my parents with 2 documents. One was a civil complaint for the restitution of the stolen $200,000 plus 35 years of compounded interest, totaling $1,200,000. The other was a quit-claim agreement. If they signed, the civil case would not be filed, but the federal criminal referral for identity fraud and wire fraud would still proceed. My father, in a small voice, asked what would happen if they didn't sign. Mr. Davis said the civil case would be filed on Monday, their house would be liened, and their accounts would be frozen. Signing was the best option for them. My father signed first, and then my mother. For the first time in 34 years, my mother was stripped of the identity she had built. They left, and I locked the door behind them. The next morning, the Thompson Family Trust was formally transferred to my name. I finally had the family I always deserved. Mrs. Thompson said, "My husband, your grandfather, would have liked you very much." In the end, Ethan died without a marrow match. I didn't attend his funeral. I moved to a small house near the ocean with Mrs. Thompson. I kept the blanket she knitted for me when I was a baby, and I put the photograph of my mother as a young girl in a drawer. I learned that being family isn't about being useful, it's about being seen and loved for who you are.